Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Students, this is our first lecture on the series of lectures on play Hamlet by William Shakespeare. Today in this lecture I will discuss its summary along with its critical analysis. So here we start our today's lecture. On a dark winter night outside Elsinore Castle in Denmark, an officer named Bernardo comes to relieve the watchman Francisco. In the heavy darkness, the men cannot see each other. Bernardo hears a footstep near him and cries, "Who's there?" After both men ensure that there is also a watchman, they relax. Cold, tired, and apprehensive from his many hours of guarding the castle, Francisco thanks Bernardo and prepares to go home and go to bed. Shortly thereafter, Bernardo is joined by Marcellus, another watchman, and Horatio, a friend of Prince Hamlet. Bernardo and Marcellus have urged Horatio to stand watch with them because they believe they have something shocking to show him. In hushed tones, they discuss the apparition they have seen for the past 2 nights and which they now hope to show Horatio. The ghost of the recently deceased King Hamlet, which they claim has appeared before them on the castle ramparts in the late hours of the night. Horatio is skeptical, but the ghost suddenly appears before the men and just as suddenly vanishes. Terrified, Horatio acknowledges that the spectre does indeed resemble the dead king of Denmark, that it even wears the armor King Hamlet wore when he battled against the armies of Norway. And the same frown he wore when he fought against the Poles. Horatio declares that the ghost must bring a warning of impending misfortune for Denmark, perhaps in the form of a military attack. And he recounts the story of King Hamlet's conquest of certain lands once belonging to Norway, saying that Fortinbras, the young young prince of Norway, now seeks to reconquer those fortified lands. The ghost materializes for a second, and Horatio tries to speak to it. The ghost remains silent, however, and disappears again just as the cock crows at the first hint of dawn. Horatio suggests that they tell Prince Hamlet, the dead king's son, about the apparition. He believes that though the ghost did not speak to him, if it is really the ghost of King Hamlet, it will not refuse to speak to his beloved son. So, students, this was our scene first, very brief summary of scene first. In this very first scene, we have we are acquainted with the basic conflict of the play, where this thing has been exposed to us through some hints and through some direct direct evidence that a ghost, who is the ghost of apparently or allegedly, that ghost is of recently deceased King Hamlet's, and it seems that ghost wants to say something, but he does not talk to anyone, including his son Hamlet's close friend, bosom friend Horatio. But Horatio and other godmen believe that this ghost will talk to his son, of course. So students, now we will see some critical analysis of the summary of the first scene of this first act of the play. As we know that this play was written in early 1600s, and it is no surprise then that many of Shakespeare's play from this period, including Hamlet, concern transfer of power from one monarch to the other, as it was the state of England, where Queen Elizabeth was reigning England, but she was at the very verge of her life, and she was about and people were much concerned about much about the transfer of power, that who will inherit the crown after Queen Elizabeth. Therefore, we do have this concern in this play as well. So these plays focus particularly on the uncertainties, betrayals, and upheavals that accompany such shifts in power. So, and the general sense of anxiety and fear that surround them. So we do find this sense of anxiety and general concern of the masses about their new monarch. The situation Shakespeare presents at the beginning of Hamlet is that a strong and beloved king has died, and the throne has been inherited not by his son. That is usually the ritual or custom in every king's time. That usually the son of the king, prince, used to inherit the throne or was crowned. But this time we see that it is not the son of the king, rather the brother of the king, who inherited the crown. So there is something unusual here. So son, as we might expect, but his brother, still grieving the old king. No one knows yet what to expect from the new one, and the guards outside the castle are fearful and suspicious. The supernatural appearance, the appearance of the ghost of the king, of the late king, on a chilling, misty night outside Elsinore Castle indicates immediately that something is wrong in Denmark, as there is a very popular phrase of Shakespeare that was uttered at this moment, that something is rotten in the state of Denmark. This ambiguity, unclarity, uncertainty, and we are acquainted with a situation or a state where, or we can smell some conspiracy there in the state of Denmark. Something rotten, something wrong has gone. कुछ हो चुका है गलत सा. तो वो जो कुछ हो चुका है गलत सा, उसको हम महसूस कर सकते हैं, लेकिन हमें पता नहीं है. Next we see, or we may say, that ghost serves to enlarge the shadow King Hamlet casts across Denmark, indicating that something about his death has upset the balance of nature. Something unnatural has happened. So the appearance of the ghost also gives physical form to the fearful anxiety and surrounds the transfer of power after king's death, seeming to imply that the future of Denmark is dark and frightening one. Horatio in particular sees the ghost as an ill omen, boding violence and turmoil in Denmark's future, comparing it to the supernatural omens that supposedly presaged the assassination of Julius Caesar in ancient Rome, and which Shakespeare has recently represented in Julius Caesar, his another play. Since Horatio proves to be right, and the appearance of the ghost does presage the later tragedies of the play, the ghost functions as a kind of internal foreshadowing, implying tragedy not only to the audience but to the character as well. The scene also introduces the character of Horatio, who is the exception of the ghost, who, with exception of the ghost, is the only major character in the scene. The other guardmen or watchmen are minor characters. Without sacrificing the forward flow of action or breaking the atmosphere of dread, Shakespeare establishes that Horatio is a good human man who is also educated, intelligent, and skeptical of supernatural events. Before he sees the ghost, he insists, "Tush, tush, it will not appear." Even after seeing it, he is reluctant to give full credence to the stories of magic and mysticism. When Marcellus says that he has heard that crowning of the cock has the power to dispel evil powers, no, at that time Horatio says, so that no fairy takes nor witch hath power to charm. Horatio replies, sorry, this was uttered by Marcellus, to which Horatio replies, so have I heard, and do in part believe, emphasizing the in part, but Horatio is not blind rationalist either, and when he sees the ghost, he does not deny its existence. But the thing that, on the contrary, he is overwhelmed with terror. His ability to accept the truth at once when his predictions have been proved wrong indicates the fundamental trustworthiness of his character. That he is not a kind of rigid person who believes in his rigidity or in his own illusions. Rather, when some evidence was there, he was not reluctant to accept it. So, in a subtle way, Shakespeare uses Horatio to represent audience perspective throughout this scene. By overcoming Horatio's skeptical resistance, the ghost gains audience suspicion of disbelief as well. So, through this method of suspension of disbelief, we start believing that this ghost has appeared in real as well. This was our first scene. Now we will discuss the summary of the second scene of the first act. In this scene, we see the morning after Horatio and the guardsmen see the ghost. King Claudius gives a speech to his courtiers explaining his recent marriage to Gertrude, his brother's widow and the mother of Prince Hamlet. Claudius says that he mourns his brother, but he has chosen to balance Denmark's mourning with the delight of his marriage. He mentions that young Fortinbras has written to him, rashly demanding the surrender of the lands King Hamlet won from Fortinbras' father. He dispatches Cornelius and Voltimand with a message for the King of Norway, Fortinbras' elderly uncle. His speech concluded, Claudius turns to Laertes, the son of the Lord Chamberlain Polonius. Laertes expresses his desire to return to France, where he was staying before his return to Denmark for Claudius' coronation. वो भी इससे सेरेमनी जो है इसकी ताजपोशी वाली जो है उसमें ही शिरकत करने के लिए आया, otherwise he was staying there. And now he wants to go back to Paris. Polonius gives his son permission and Claudius jovially grants Laertes his consent as well. Turning to Prince Hamlet, who was also there, Claudius asked why the clouds still hang upon him, clouds of gloom. He was in a gloomy, melancholic mood, therefore he says, as Hamlet is still wearing black mourning clothes, Gertrude urges him to cast off his knightly color, but he, Prince Hamlet, replies bitterly that his inner sorrow is so great that his dour appearance is merely a poor mirror of it. ये तो कुछ भी नहीं, जितना मैं उदास हूँ, जितना गमगीन हूँ, उसके सामने ये जो मेरी अभी की appearance है, this is nothing. Affecting a tone of fatherly advice, वो affected मतलब कि उसने बना के faking his tone. Claudius declares that all fathers die and all sons must lose their fathers. When a son loses a father, he is duty bound to mourn. But to mourn for too long is unmanly and inappropriate. Claudius urges Hamlet to think of him as a father, reminding the prince that he stands in line to succeed the throne upon Claudius' death. With this in mind, Claudius says that he does not wish for Hamlet to return to school at Wittenberg, where he had been studying for his father's death. As Hamlet has asked to do, Gertrude echoes her husband, professing a desire for Hamlet to return to remain close to her. Hamlet stiffly agrees to obey her. Claudius claims to be so pleased by Hamlet's decision to stay that he will celebrate with festivities and cannon fire and an old custom called the King's Rouse. Ordering Gertrude to follow him. He escorts her from the room and the court follows. Alone, Hamlet exclaims that he wishes he could die. This is Hamlet's first soliloquy. We have six soliloquies in this play, and this is one of the first soliloquies on the part of Hamlet. He could die, he could evaporate and cease to exist. He wishes bitterly that God had not made suicide a sin. काश ये जो सुइसाइड है ये कोई एक गुनाह ना होता तो वो अभी इस वक्त वो कमिट कर लेता. He is so disappointed and in despair, anguished. He laments his father's death and his mother's hasty marriage to his uncle. He remembers how deeply in love his parents seemed, and he curses that the thought that now, not yet 2 months after his father's death, his mother has married his father's far inferior brother. यहाँ से कुछ लाइन्स हैं जो 150 से 157 तक कुछ लाइन्स हैं, मैं कोट करूँगा. O God, a beast that wants discourse of reason, would have mourned longer, married with my uncle, my father's brother, but no more like my father than I to Hercules. Within a month, ere yet the salt of most unrighteous tears had left the flushing in her galled eyes, she married. O most wicked speed to post with such dexterity to incestuous cheats. तो यहाँ पर वो इसको बहुत ही बुरी टर्म्स में, in very low terms, he is associated this marriage of his mother to his uncle, lusty marriage या hasty marriage को उसने lust का सारा उसने शाखसाना करार दिया है. Next we see in this scene Hamlet quite suddenly, as Horatio strides into the room, चुप कर देते जल्दी से, followed by Marcellus and Bernardo. Horatio was a close friend of Hamlet at the university in Wittenberg, and Hamlet, happy to see him, asks why he has left the school to travel to Denmark. Horatio says that he came to see King Hamlet's funeral, to which Hamlet curtly replies that Horatio came to see his mother's wedding. तो उसने तंजन बिटरली ये बात की है, तुम उसके फ्यूनरल में नहीं मेरी माँ की शादी में शिरकत करने आए हो. और इसकी वजह यह है कि ये शादी बहुत जल्दी होगी जिसकी डेथ के बाद, इसलिए उस बात का भी उसको दुख है. Horatio agrees that one followed closely on the heels of the other. He then tells Hamlet that he, Marcellus, and Bernardo have seen what happens to be his father's ghost stunned. Hamlet agrees to keep watch with them at that night in hope that he will be able to speak to the apparition of his father. Next we see the analysis of this first scene, and in this first scene we see that we have witnessed some very crucial and critical dialogues and situation of the play. Having established a dark, ghostly atmosphere in the very first scene, Shakespeare devotes the second to the seemingly jovial court of recently crowned King Claudius. If the area outside the castle is murky with the aura of dread and anxiety, the room inside the castle are devoted to an energetic attempt to banish that aura, as the king and the queen and the courtiers desperately pretend that nothing is out of the ordinary. Everything is normal, everything is as usual, therefore they are pretending that they are happy, nothing has happened. Who has died is died, he is no more, therefore we should move on, like feeling they are trying to create. It is difficult to imagine a more convoluted family dynamic or a more out of balance political situation. But Claudius nevertheless preaches an ethic of balance to his courtiers, pledging to sustain and combine the sorrow he feels for the king's death and the joy he feels for his wedding in equal parts. Whether he is more happy or more sad, it is he makes a kind of equilibrium of both these emotions, where he sees that he is partly happy, partly sad. और वो इसी चीज़ को बैलेंस साइकिल बना के अपने कोर्टियर्स को चलाने, दरअसल ही इज़ हैप्पी, ही इज़ ऑल हैप्पी इनसाइड आउट। वो हर तरह से खुशी है, लेकिन ही इज़ प्रिटेंडिंग दैट ही इज़ सैड एज वेल। But despite Claudius' efforts, the merriment of the court seems superficial. ये सारा जो माहौल है आपको सुपरफिशियल लगेगा, और ख़ास तौर पर उस वक्त ज़्यादा आ जाता है इसमें सुपरफिशियलिटी का एलिमेंट जब हैमलेट आके इंक्लूड करता है बातों के ज़रिए अपनी, और उसका जो एटीट्यूड है, रवैया है, उसकी गुफ्तगू है, उसका जो रिस्पॉन्स है इस सारे इवेंट के ऊपर, वो बड़ा डिस्टर्बिंग लगता है हमें, और हम उसकी फील कर सकते हैं उसकी तकलीफ़ को। और यहाँ की जो बातें इन लोगों की वो भी सुपरफिशियल है, खासतौर पर क्लॉडियस और क्वीन की तरफ से। दे आर मोर हैप्पी being married and being crowned. This is largely due to the fact that the idea of balance Claudius pledges to follow is unnatural. How it is impossible to balance sorrow for a brother's death with happiness for having married a dead brother's wife. It's impossible. Seems impossible. Claudius' speech is full of contradictory words, ideas, and phrases, beginning with, "Though yet of Hamlet our late brother's death, the memory be green," which combines the idea of death and decay with the idea of greenery, growth, and renewal. So these both ideas cannot be combined, but he is trying to combine these both feelings and ideas. He also speaks of our sometimes sister nor queen, sister-in-law. Once she was his sister-in-law, to whom he calls our sometimes sister nor queen. Defeated joy, an auspicious and a dropping eye, mirth in funeral and dirge in marriage. ये कितना खूबसूरत फ्रेज है, शेक्सपियरियन फ्रेज और एक्सप्रेशन कैसा है। mirth in funeral, जनाजे में या डेथ पे खुशी, डर्च वो जो बजाते होते हैं घंटी सी जनाजे के ऊपर, वो मैरिज के दरमियान वो शहनाई की जगह पे वो घंटी बज रही है, यानी कि खुशी के मौके पे गमीम का एहसास, सोग वाला, और जो सोग वाली जगह है फ्यूनरल, वहाँ पे खुशी का एहसास। इट्स अ मिक्स्ड काइंड ऑफ फीलिंग अकॉर्डिंग टू हिम, whereas it is not, he is just trying to enforce this feeling upon the courtiers as well. It's a beautiful expression where he says, "Are sometimes sister nor queen." For me, it is very beautiful. These ideas sit uneasily with one another. Shakespeare uses this speech to give his audience an uncomfortable first impression of Claudius. तो ये क्लॉडियस का हमें यहाँ पे बड़ा एक अनयूजुअल और अजीब सा फर्स्ट इम्प्रेशन आता है हमारे ऊपर। हम उसको थोड़ा सा एक्सेंट्रिक भी नज़र आएगा, अजीब। उसका जो एक है ना ग्रीडी, उसका लस्टी और अनयूजुअल, एक्सेंट्रिक, अनप्रिडिक्टेबल सा बंदा जो है, वो उसका इमेज हमें आ गया इस तरह की बातों के साथ। The negative impression is furthered when Claudius affects a fatherly role towards the bereaved Hamlet. वो गमज़दा है और अपनी तरफ से उसका बाप बनने की कोशिश कर रहा है, advising him to stop grieving for his dead father and adapt to a new life in Denmark. Hamlet obviously does not want Claudius' advice, and Claudius' motives in giving it are thoroughly suspect, since, after all, Hamlet is the man who would have inherited the throne and Claudius not snatched it from him. अगर Hamlet had not snatched it from, Claudius had not snatched this chance from Hamlet, he would have been the king now. But now he is the king, he himself is the king. So he usurped the crown, whereas it was the right of Hamlet. The result of all this blatant dishonesty is that this scene portrays as dire a situation in Denmark as the first scene does, where the first scene illustrated the fear and supernatural danger lurking in Denmark. The second scene hints at the corruption and weakness of the king and his court. The scene also furthers the idea that Denmark is somehow unsound as a nation, as Claudius declares that Fortinbras makes his battle plans. Fortinbras की तरफ से खतरा है इनको, डेनमार्क वालों को हमला कर देगा. Holding a weak spousal of our worth, our thinking by our late dear brother's death are stated to be disjointed and out of frame. इसका मतलब है जो लेड किंग था उसका इतना रोब दबदबा था कि कोई की तरफ मैली आंख से देखता नहीं, सोचता नहीं था कि हम डेनमार्क पे हमला भी करेंगे। लेकिन आज इनके दुश्मन उनके बनने के बाद उन्होंने ये सोचना शुरू कर दिया, बल्कि उन्होंने को थ्रेट भी भेजा हुआ है, माइल्ड सा थ्रेट। Prince Hamlet, devastated by his father's death and betrayed by his mother's marriage, is introduced as the only character who is unwilling to play along with Claudius' gaudy attempt to mimic a healthy royal court. On the one hand, this may suggest that he is the only honest character in the royal court, the only person of high standing whose sensibilities are offended by what has happened in the aftermath of his father's death. On the other hand, it suggests that he is a malcontent, someone who refuses to go along with the rest of the court for the sake of the greater good of stability. The rest of the people are going along with the court or by the flow, whereas he has refused to go by the flow. Rather, he seems to going against the flow. Everybody is pacified, everybody is happy, cheerful, whereas Prince Hamlet is the only character in this scene who does not seem in content. He does not seem contented. He is in a state of malcontentment. तो वो नहीं है, तो he seems aloof, alienated from the rest of the people present there. In any case, Hamlet already feels, as Marcellus will say later, that something is rotten in the state of Denmark. We also see that his mother's hasty remarriage has shattered his opinion of womanhood. उसको औरतों से भी, यहाँ पे हमें शेक्सपियर बहुत ज़्यादा मिसोजिनिस्ट लगता है, इसकी यहाँ से इसकी जो hasty remarriage उसकी मदर की, that has also shattered the image of womanhood in his eyes, where he says, "Friendly, thy name is woman." He cries out famously in this scene, a motif that will develop through his unraveling romantic relationship with Ophelia and his deteriorating relationship with his mother. Only two women are in his life. One is his mother, the other is his beloved, and he refrains or deteriorates his relationship with these two women. So that's because his idea of womanhood also deteriorated. He stands disillusioned in this regard. His soliloquy about suicide, or that this too solid flesh would melt, thaw, the resolve itself into a dew, ushers in what will be a central idea in the play. The world is painful to live in, but within the Christian framework of the play, if one commits suicide to end that pain, one damns oneself to internal suffering in hell. We do have the same notion in Islam as well, that whosoever commits suicide will go to hell. So same thing we find in Christianity as well, that if he commits suicide, he will be condemned forever. So he refrains from committing suicide. Therefore, the question of the moral validity of suicide is unbearably painful. World will haunt the rest of the play. It reaches the height of its urgency in the most famous line in all of English literature: to be or not to be. That is the question. It's the most famous line of in English literature: to be or not to be. This epitomizes the situation through which Prince Hamlet suffers throughout this play, and this also epitomizes a mental conflict of anybody, where he is in this state: to be or not to be, करूँ या ना करूँ, may it be or may it not be, क्या किया जाए क्या ना किया जाए, जब दो कॉन्फ्लिक्ट आ जाते इंसान. In this scene, Hamlet mainly focuses on the appalling conditions of life, railing against Claudius' court as an unweeded garden that grows to seed things rank and gross in nature, possesses it merely. Throughout the play, we watch the god crumbling of the beliefs on which Hamlet's worldview has been based. Already in this first soliloquy, religion has failed him, and his wrapped family situation can offer him no solace. He is all anguish. वो सफरिंग में है, मेंटल एग्नी से गुजर रहा है. ही राइट नाउ वो दो तरह की उसके अंदर बातें हैं. उसके वो ही फील्स हिमसेल्फ डिजेक्टेड or in a very doleful situation where he is unable to decide what course of life he should adopt, क्या करे और क्या ना करे. और वो बहुत ज़्यादा उसको दो चीज़ों का दुख है, अपनी बाप की मौत के साथ साथ उसको अपनी माँ की दोबारा से जल्दी से जो हेस्टी मैरिज है उसका वो नहीं एक्सपेक्ट कर रहा था कि माँ उसकी ये काम करेगी. और उसको इसके साथ ये भी दुख है उसने उस शख्स से शादी की जो कि उसकी बाप की बराबरी का ना था. किसी और से ऐसे होती जो उसकी बाप की बराबरी का होता तो शायद इसको किसी तरह दुख ना होता. जिस शख्स के लिए मुझे छोड़ के गया अपनी बराबरी का भी होता तो सब्र आ जाता. तो सब्र आने के लिए बराबरी थी या उसे सुपीरियोरिटी ज़रूरी थी. यहाँ पे इन्फीरियर से शादी की और उसको वो लस्ट करार देता है. और उसके साथ साथ वो इस सिचुएशन में ये भी समझता है कि उसके साथ ये भी जैसा कि एक्सपेक्ट किया जाता था कि बादशाह के बाद उसका बेटा ही बादशाह बनेगा अगला. तो यहाँ पे हम वो एक्सपेक्टेशंस रखते हुए जब देखते हैं सिचुएशन को तो वहाँ पर भी हैमलेट मजलूम नज़र आता है क्योंकि उसके चचा ने किंग को यूजर्व कर दिया था. तो ये फर्स्ट एक्ट के हमारे दो सीन्स हमने इस एपिसोड में डिस्कस किए. नेक्स्ट वी विल बी डिस्कसिंग द रिमेनिंग सीन्स ऑफ द फर्स्ट एक्ट ऑफ द प्ले हैमलेट. थैंक यू वेरी मच.